Got it. So we are partially live on YouTube. We're still not like publicly visible. We're just we are visible on the channel. So visible on the channel पे अभी बार just I have to update the thumbnail. ये हो गया. Cool. So guys, we are going public in 3, 2, 1, and I believe we are live. I think we are live. So थोड़ा Great. So hello folks. I think and
good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Today, me, KCS sir, and Kaustubh sir will be discussing the GS1 ka paper. We'll be going in depth with the mains paper that was held early in the morning from 9 a.m. to 12. And therein, we will be discussing each of the 3 sections, whereas I'll be covering history, KCS sir will be covering Indian society, and Kaustubh sir will be covering geography, because we are the respective faculties at UPSCprep.com for these particular subjects. And at the same time, the model structure, model solutions that we are discussing here, these are also available on the Telegram channel, which you can find in the video description. But I would highly recommend that if you are somebody who has given mains today, please switch off the video, go back to sleep, go study, relax. No need to watch this. You can come back to this maybe 10 days later when you're done with mains. This video in particular is for people who are preparing for 2024 mains, 25 mains in future. Because if you're giving mains right now, please don't watch this video. The simple idea being that it messes with your head. You might have done some question correctly. You might have done some question like a slightly different way. So don't let that interfere with your attempts for GS3 and 4 tomorrow. And that's all that I will say. And we'll begin the paper discussion now. Right. So I think एक news thing, please do not spam the chat, because just a second. Okay, great. So please not spam the chat. We'll take up the questions in the chat, whatever they come up one by one towards the end of the session. But if you have any doubts with regards to what is being discussed, so that we can take up, you can let us know in the YouTube ka chat section. Right. So model structure ye hai. First and foremost, something over here, pretty much like last year, what has happened is that geography has gotten much higher weightage than 2020 or even the years before. So पिछले 2-3 साल से geography को ज़्यादा marks मिल रहे हैं यहाँ पे. That's a very simple metric. Indian history and Indian society are getting 75 marks each. Total आपका वही 250 marks यहाँ पे रह रहा है. If before further moving forward, if I have to simply talk about what was my impression of the paper overall, so paper ka overall simple sa cheez yahan pe tha that I think is pe we can have a bit of a panel discussion, that history questions did not deal a lot with modern history. They're dealing a lot more with ancient and medieval history. There's a question directly on Vedic civilization. There's a question on how geography has shaped ancient India. So there's a lot of cross between questions. कि अब जैसे the very simple question, how has geographical features shaped ancient India? So it's history and geography. There's no separation. Similarly, you'll see a lot of the society wala questions have like, massive overlaps with a lot of other things. So, KCS sir, what was your impression of the paper for the Indian society wala part?
Yeah, first, as an overall, I would say it's certainly not difficult. There'll always be debate between whether it was easy or mediocre, medium level difficulty. That will definitely be there, but I would say definitely it was not very difficult in terms of topics or in terms of also the way the questions have been framed. Usually we do find that in some cases 15 marker questions get difficult even to understand. There are terms that are difficult. For example, a few years ago, there was a word that was used, obscurantism. Not many people knew what obscurantism is, right? So no such surprises this time. And the questions are also not too lengthy. Also, it's not very difficult for someone to decode in the sense how many parts are there, okay? Whether we have to give points in favor of the argument or against the argument. It is not a difficult task there. And coming to interlinkages, yes, it's been now 10 years. Okay, it's the 11th year since the pattern has changed. Now, if you look from the point of view of UPSC, right, possibly initial few years, it can ask questions directly based on a particular topic, but then it runs out of those topics, so it has to again think of some new questions so that there is no repetition. So what we have been seeing is there has been interlinkages within the broad area. That means, for example, there was a question a few years ago linking population control with women empowerment.
Yeah.
Now, both of the topics are different subtopics within Indian society, but then the interlinkages again is within society part altogether. Now, what we are seeing is a trend wherein there is more of cross linkages across the so-called topics, like history having some bit of society or geography having some bit of society, right? So this is what you can see is I think natural progression or evolution of the way the questions that have been asked and the interlinkages. But overall, I would say Indian society is fairly doable, and obviously a lot of applied knowledge, some bit of current knowledge is required to have a better quality of answer.
Kaustubh sir, what was your impression of the geography parts?
Hello all. Abhijit and KCS sir, I completely agree and second the opinion that you have just expressed, that what we see even in geography, it is visible that the static portion is not very much highlighted. And what UPSC has done is they are more focusing on current related issues, which are major challenges, which can be interpreted as major challenges in front of the country and the future, present as well as future bureaucrats. So if you look at the questions, freshwater resources, then the resource potential of India, then it is also about urbanization. That question was, now urbanization falls in geography, but then the societal aspect of it was highlighted. Again, geography as factors and the historical, how did it shape the rise of ancient India or development, that was asked. So UPSC, I think, it's a positive move that they have moved away from watertight compartmentalization. That is one thing, and they have also moved from just the core or technical part to more about flux, the challenges in front of the nation, and applied portion where no matter what subject you are dealing with, unless you realize its interlinkages, intersectoral, interdisciplinary linkages, plus its association with the present problems in front of the country, it is difficult for students to really comprehensively answer those questions.
I completely agree with you, sir, because even in, say, history ka questions hai, so it's not a question about railways per se. It is a question about the impact of railways on the various countries across the world. So, you also have to take into account not just the railways ka socio-cultural impact kya hai, but railways ka socio-cultural impact in a colonial context and in a independent context, because there were railways introduced in countries which were not colonies. So there they had a very different impact, right? So again, I'll just repeat the small reminder over here कि if you have given mains, please do not watch this video. अभी तक जो हो गया ठीक है, अभी तक देख लिया हो गया, please do not watch this. Why? Because again, don't let it mess with your head. ये चीजें आती रहेंगी, जाती रहेंगी, ये आपके लिए नहीं है. This is for people preparing for next year. And with that, we will resume the discussion. So I'll be taking up the modern history questions to begin with. And इसमें किसी को कोई डाउट आता है तो प्लीज डू लेट अस नो इन द चैट, विल टेक दैट अप इन टाइम, राइट? सो प्राइमरीली सबसे पहली चीज, अगर जैसे केसीएस सर ने बहुत मेंशन किया था यहाँ पे, व्हिच वाज दैट क्वेश्चंस आर प्रीटी सिंपल एंड स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, नथिंग डूइंग, कोई बहुत ज्यादा आपको दिमाग नहीं लगाना. एक्सप्लेन द रोल ऑफ ज्योग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स, डेवलपमेंट ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया, कोर डिमांड वेरी क्लियर, नो कंफ्यूजन. हाउ डिड ज्योग्राफी कंट्रीब्यूट टू डेवलपमेंट ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया? तो यू कैन टॉक अबाउट राइट इन द इंट्रोडक्शन what are the geographical factors that are being talked about. You could talk about the fertile plains, mountain ranges, river systems, the Deccan Plateau. All of these things you can talk about. Multiple introductions ka example we have given. You can choose whatever you like, but the core idea is give some of the examples of what are these geographical features. Then when you come to the main body, right, how did they contribute and what was the contribution? So Himalayan mountains, the contribution as natural barrier, right, protected India from being a barren wasteland. Why? Because Central Asia is pretty much barren. Why? Because it's so cold. River systems, fertile soils, great agricultural settling, civilizations were built around the major river systems. There was the Indus Valley, there was the Magadhan Empire, there was the Nanda Empire. All of these, what kya ho raha hai, river systems ke aas paas ban rahe hain. The monsoon winds, they brought, a lot of, how do you say, water for irrigation. And on top of that, monsoon winds were also very, very favorable in terms of, bringing in the traders from the West. India in the past also has been a society which has, traded a lot with the Western civilizations also. So ये multiple आपके, geographical features हो गए. Indian Ocean क्या है, Thar Desert क्या है, कि अब जैसे apart from Himalayas, the Thar, the combination of these two essentially meant that the only way to cross over into India from the West was the Swat Valley in Pakistan. Right, so naturally, why did Indian civilizations get shaped in a particular way? Because of these physical geographical barriers. So detail mein, if you want to read this PDF, you can, download the PDF itself. It will be available on our Telegram channel. Here, we'll just be discussing the broad structure of the question. So again, हमने geographical features देखे, उनका direct Indian development पे impact देखा. उसके साथ अब अगर आपको conclusion करना है, तो एक तो ये general conclusion होता है. Right, I can say that geography profoundly impacted India's development. This is a fine conclusion if you have no other idea, if you have no other thing to say. But just like आगे भी हम चल के देखेंगे कि modern day में भी there's a question in geography which says how has the coastline of India been is important. So that is also something that you can bring up right now in this question ka conclusion right here. It is not just that geography shaped India's history in ancient India. It is still shaping India's history in the modern day India also, right? So that gives that holistic perspective जो कौस्तुभ सर बात कर रहे थे कि you have to show that interlinkage कि भी ये नहीं है कि मेरे को सिर्फ ancient India पूछा है तो मेरे को सिर्फ ancient India दिमाग में बज रहा है. Now second question, this sort of again is a pattern question. ये बहुत बार पिछले 3-4-5 साल में repeat हो चुका है. Sometimes it's Gandhi ji and Ambedkar, sometimes it's Gandhi ji and Netaji Bose, sometimes it's Gandhi ji and now Rabindranath Tagore. तो चलता रहता है. अब बहुत स्पेसिफिकली आपसे पूछा है डिफरेंस एजुकेशन नेशनलिज्म में गांधी जी एंड रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर. नाउ व्हाइल द क्वेश्चन हैज क्लियरली सेड डिफरेंस, इफ देयर आर सम सिमिलैरिटीज अकॉर्डिंग टू यू, यू शुड डेफिनेटली मेंशन देम आल्सो, राइट? ये लिमिटेशन आपको नहीं है. क्वेश्चन ने डिफरेंस पूछा है तो मेजॉरिटी पार्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन विल डील विद द डिफरेंसेस, बट यू कैन आल्सो ऐड द सिमिलैरिटीज, राइट? तो Gandhi ji and Rabindranath Tagore का introduction में either you can talk about either of them कि भाई इन्होंने क्या किया, major contribution क्या था, but the main body will talk about कि भाई गांधी जी का basic principles of education क्या थे, कि भाई नई तालीम का जो system उनका था, right, कि it was a lot based on handicrafts, it was a lot based on self, people using their hands, people learning to do the labor. Then Gandhi ji's idea of education also revolved around moral development, and it was a lot around खादी and ग्राम का उत्थान. तो गांधी जी का ये सारा कोर चीज चल रहा था. एट द सेम टाइम रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर की अगर हम बात करें तो ही फोकस्ड अ लॉट ऑन म्यूजिक, आर्ट as one of the core principles on which education should be based. His idea of education was holistic development, whereas Gandhi ji talked a lot about education. He also did teach a lot of the Satyagrahis in his Sabarmati ashram. Rabindranath Tagore, on the other hand, established an institution which was essentially Shanti Niketan, which is now the Vishwa Bharati University in the modern day. So Rabindranath Tagore ka legacy in that sense is particularly from an education point of view, agar dekha jaye, it's much more broader and directly impactful. Right. So Atma Shakti over here is a concept that both of them were very pro about. Gandhiji talked about Atma Shakti or self-reliance in terms of khadi and handicrafts development. But Rabindranath Tagore talked about Atma Shakti in spiritual upliftment. तो दोनों बात कर रहे हैं similar चीजों की education के through ही. Then if we talk about nationalism, तो Gandhiji and Tagore both had similar ideas about inclusive nationalism. But Rabindranath Tagore was a lot more critical of aggressive nationalism, which is also something that can be said slightly about Gandhiji. He was critical of aggressive nationalism, but later on, as we see, the Quit India movement, mein Gandhiji himself became like, karo ya maro. So that can be a slight difference that you can carve out over there. Gandhiji was again, moral nationalism and active resistance के बारे में जो सत्याग्रह का उनका concept था. So those are the core ideas that Gandhiji followed, Satya, Ahimsa, in his approach towards nationalism. Whereas again, Rabindranath Tagore wanted to craft this inclusive identity of India, which was a universal Indian spirit, which essentially is, encapsulated in his Jan Gan Man. So, जो हमारा national anthem है, eventually, that is the feeling that Rabindranath Tagore had towards nationalism. Right. तो अब ये वाला question जो है, इसमें आप अपना, comparison table format में भी इसको बना सकते हो. There is no problems with that. But comfort आपका कहाँ depend कर रहा है, उस चीज पे इसको हम ज़्यादा emphasize करें कि भाई if you feel कि the paragraph format is better for you, you go with the paragraph format. If you feel the comparison table is better for you, you do that. Comparison table अगर आप करते हो तो लास्ट में similarities का एक दो लाइन आप अलग से लिख सकते हो. But if you're writing in paragraphs तो similarities का जैसे हमने education की similarity आत्मशक्ति के बारे में बात की वहां पे आप कर सकते हो. And similarly Rabindranath Tagore and Gandhi जी का nationalism पे common ideas जो थे towards the end of that section on nationalism आप लिख सकते हो. तो again conclusion can either be very general. हमने यहाँ पे बहुत जनरल आपको कंक्लूजन दी हैं ताकि आपको एक आइडिया लग जाए कि देखो इस तरीके से कंक्लूजन लिखना है. बट यू कैन हैव अ मोर स्पेसिफिक कंक्लूजन आल्सो, लाइक वी टॉक्ड अबाउट कि भाई बोथ गांधी जी एंड रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर's presence in terms of their ideas on education can still be felt in the present day, right? तो किस तरीके से फील किए जाते हैं? रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर के इन द फॉर्म ऑफ विश्व भारती यूनिवर्सिटी एंड गांधी जी का इन द फॉर्म ऑफ द एम्फसिस ऑन वर्नाकुलर एजुकेशन. क्योंकि in the end that was the core idea that Gandhi ji had कि craft based education, vernacular education से शुरू करवाओ and then focus on vocational education. Right, coming to the next question. So very simple, again straightforward question. Socio-economic effect, introduction of railways and different countries of the world. So this is a question of world history. But again, this is a question if you do not know कि यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है, आपको नहीं समझ आता कि भाई वर्ल्ड में कहाँ किस टाइम इंट्रोडक्शन हुआ रेलवेज का, तो ऑल दैट यू हैव टू डू इज कीप इन माइंड कि भाई इंडिया पे सोशो इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट क्या हुआ था एंड देन ट्राई एंड एक्सपैंड फ्रॉम देयर. तो बेसिक इंट्रोडक्शन यू कैन टॉक अबाउट कि भाई रेलवेज अराउंड द वर्ल्ड middle of the 19th century में ही आए थे, because that is around when the steam engine and all of those new technologies were invented. And once they came, they revolutionized transportation and socio-economic transformations. Primarily transportation, but उसके साथ साथ और क्या चीजें. तो और क्या चीजों में 2-3-4 पार्ट हमने मेजर डिस्कस कर लिए हैं. एक तो इकोनॉमिक इफेक्ट हम डिस्कस कर लेंगे, एक सोशो कल्चरल कंबाइंड तरीके से हम डिस्कस कर लेंगे. तो इकोनॉमिक इफेक्ट में सबसे पहले there was the expansion of market. So this is also something that we know from the Indian example, that tea plantations could be moved further inland. The British could extract revenue from different parts. The USA maybe. Now again, this is the part. If you do not have these examples, कोई बात नहीं. आप जनरल एक्सपेंशन ऑफ मार्केट भी लिखोगे, उसको थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन कर दोगे, चलेगा. इफ यू हैव एग्जांपल्स, दैट इज द बेस्ट थिंग. व्हाई? बिकॉज द क्वेश्चन इज आस्किंग यू स्पेसिफिक थिंग्स. But if you don't have examples, at least 2-3 marks you can get with giving the general points. Then stimulation of industries. So stimulation of industries, even modern day में आप देखोगे, it happens कि if you have a good road network, if you have good internet connectivity, तो other industries start swinging up. Similarly, development of railways led to stimulation of industries. Employment opportunities definitely बढ़ती ही हैं, not just in construction of railways, but because of the connectivity increasing, the people, commerce booms. सोशो कल्चरल इम्पैक्ट अगर देखें हम, तो यहाँ पे मोबिलिटी एंड माइग्रेशन डेफिनेटली इंक्रीजेस. वन ऑफ द रीजंस व्हिच इज सेड फॉर द इमर्जेंस ऑफ नेशनलिज्म इन इंडिया वाज बिकॉज इंडिया बिकेम कनेक्टेड. बिफोर दैट, ट्रैवलिंग फ्रॉम कोलकाता टू बॉम्बे वाज लाइक इट कुड टेक अ लॉन्ग टाइम, बट विद रेलवेज दैट जर्नी इज शॉर्टेंड. तो मोबिलिटी इंक्रीजेस, माइग्रेशन इंक्रीजेस. बिकॉज ऑफ मोबिलिटी एंड माइग्रेशन, द काइंड ऑफ फैमिली structure also sort of increases, changes. तो यहाँ पे जैसे as you can see interlinkages वाला चीज भी आ रहा है. Urbanization and development of new towns. तो further spread of urbanization वाली चीज होती है. तो colonial impacts आप देख रहे हो यहाँ पे कि इंडिया वाले ही चीजें हैं सारी. It's nothing very different, but in free countries, for example in the USA or in Britain, these developments were much more impactful for a positive economic growth, whereas in India, because of the colonial nature of the government in India, so it led to a lot of drain of wealth. तो colonial exploitation की भी बात definitely हमें करनी चाहिए कि भाई कॉन्गो में क्या फर्क पड़ा था अलग से, केन्या में क्या हुआ था, इंडिया में कैसे हुआ था, because these were definitely the impacts of railways. And finally, you can talk about even in the modern day that airline travel is increasing in India. It is one of the things that the airline industry is hoping for a lot of government support in, but still the majority of India travels by railways, right? So railways are still a very important lifeline for the country. So I think iske baad I'll just continue with the discussion of the society wala questions, because 1, 2, 3 and then 11, 12, 13 are Indian society questions. Coming to question number 11. So, like KCS sir has said, there is no confusion in these questions at all. सीधा आपसे पूछा है main features of Vedic society and religions, right? And do you think some features are still prevailing in Indian society? तो आपका first part of the answer becomes कि you talk about main features of society and religion, and then the second part you talk about कि भाई अभी भी present है क्या. तो we made a detailed table कि भाई early Vedic society, and then we have also made a survey of later Vedic society. तो ये आप पढ़ सकते हो डिटेल में कि भाई चाइल्ड मैरिज थी नहीं थी, टेम्पल्स कैसे होते थे, who were the gods, इंद्र एंड वरुण, इनकी पूजा करी जाती थी अर्ली वैदिक सोसाइटी में. लेटर वैदिक सोसाइटी में प्रजापति, विष्णु, शिव, इनकी वो करी जाती थी पूजा. तो आफ्टर ऑल ऑफ दिस, कोर आइडिया जो अपने को बताना है अब, which is this, कि भाई what are the features from Vedic society which are still prevailing in modern Indian society. So this is again one of those questions जहाँ पे काफी आपका overlap है with Indian society, क्योंकि भाई मतलब caste is one of these things. Caste has origins in the Varna society, Vedic society. So Varna and caste now prevailing feature के साथ साथ आप small mention यहाँ पे इस चीज का भी कर सकते हो कि भाई despite the fact that they have prevailed, their features and forms might have changed, which as you will see later is also a question for Indian society. What is the continuity and change in the caste system, which cases sir will take up. So patriarchal values, obviously Indian society is very patriarchal. That is also something that we have gained from there. Because Vedic societies में property is passed down along the male line. Then Vedic rituals. So this is one of the most important things. हवन इतने होते हैं कि भाई मतलब आपका गृह प्रवेश का हवन है, आपका बच्चा हुआ है उसका हवन है, मतलब आप कुछ भी कर रहे हो हवन हो जाता है. तो हवन being that Vedic ritual coming from those times is something that is still very prevalent in modern Indian society. Then there are some philosophical concepts which are also very prevalent, such as कर्म. आज की डेट में भी मतलब हम कॉमन पार्लेंस में ये चीज तो बात करते हैं ना कि भाई मतलब ये तुम्हारे कर्मों का भोग है, मतलब पढ़ाई नहीं करी इसलिए नहीं हुआ, पढ़ाई कर लेते तो हो जाता, जो करोगे वैसा होगा. This is something that you've heard so many times from your parents, because this is that cultural heritage that we have gotten. So conclusion में आप यहाँ पे again बोल सकते हो that even though Vedic systems and Vedic ideas have survived to the modern day, a lot of the function has changed, right? कि पहले जो हवन हुआ करते थे उनका अलग significance होता था, उनका अलग intensity होती थी. Now obviously वो हवन का intensity भी कम है, हवन का significance could be slightly different, and उस तरीके से caste भी change हुई है. All of these things have modified and changed slightly over time. So this is how you can conclude in this particular answer. Right, coming to the next one. What were the main tech changes introduced during the Sultanate period? Again, very simple, straightforward question. आपसे पूछा कि भाई list of changes बता दो, और उसके बाद how did these changes influence the Indian society? तो medieval history का question है ये. तो introduction में you can simply state over here what is the Sultanate period? Which period are you talking about? The 12th to 16th century, when the Delhi Sultanate was at the center of politics, that was the period. Or what you can alternatively also do, you can mention one or two of the technologies which were introduced during the Sultanate period, which effectively then were will explain later. बहुत लोगों का ये जैसे doubt होता है कि if I'm mentioning something in the introduction, so am I not repeating myself if I mention it again? Right? For example, you can say what were the main technological changes during Sultanate period? New military technology, paper, was mass produced, metallurgical techniques were improved. So then they say, ab my military technology, when I write it downwards, so is that not repetition? No, you can explain further what military technologies came about and how did they impact. So repetition nahi hai ye, but introduction mein, if you can give me something succinct about what exactly you're going to talk about, it's a very good way to start your answer. तो मेन टेक्नोलॉजी जो थी हमारी मिलिट्री में आई थी, गन पाउडर एंड कैनन्स they were present in India, ऐसा नहीं था, but they became much more widespread during the Sultanate period, right? And cannons, anytime we know कि military technology में change आता है, that brings about rapid change in the political and economic system also. तो military के अलावा अगर हम देखें तो paper industry was something that became much more widespread. And आज की डेट में भी अगर हम देखें तो whenever the means of communication have opened the floodgates कि भी ज्यादा लोग communicate कर पा रहे हैं, ज्यादा लोग पढ़ पा रहे हैं, ज्यादा लोग सीख पा रहे हैं, तो then that also leads to a certain amount of social and cultural change. Similarly, metallurgical techniques नहीं आ गई थी. Damascus, हालांकि Damascus steel is something that had always been present in India, but the art of inlaying gold and silver, बिदरी वेयर which is बिदर के एरिया में जो आपका मेटलर्जिकल टेक्नोलॉजी होती थी वो वाइड स्प्रेड हो गई. देन वाटर मैनेजमेंट, स्टेप वेल्स एंड बाउलीज, these became a lot more prominent during the Sultanate period. And architectural innovation, or essentially the beginning of the Indo-Islamic school of architecture. So this is something that also came about then. So architectural innovation में क्या है कि ताजमहल में बोला जाता है डोम है ऊपर, that is a perfect dome. So that is something that did not exist in India before the Islamic influence came in. उससे पहले हमारा temples जो होते थे they were like conical. तो changes क्या आएंगे? Warfare dynamics में obviously change आएगा. The way forts are built will change. The way strategy works will change. People will start training soldiers differently. तो ये सारी चीजें होंगी. Literary works में boost होगा in the sense of that more and more people will start writing, more and more people will start reading. Literacy in general will expand because paper का availability easier हो गया. Economic growth because trade ज़्यादा हो रहा है, better technologies आ गई हैं. And water harvest आप कर रहे हो तो naturally agriculture भी improve होगा. And Alai Darwaza at the Qutub complex. So Alai Darwaza is a funny monument in the sense it's just a darwaza. At the Qutub complex, there is the Qutub Minar, there is the iron pillar, and then there is just a gate. So, but still, it is a unique exposition of the combination of Indian and Islamic architecture. तो यहाँ पे again, आप क्या बोल सकते हो कि the Sultanate period was essentially an interim period between the previous rulers, which were a lot of pan-India empires. There were big empires, and after the Sultanate. There were also pan-India Mughal Empire, big empires, but Sultanate period mein, there were a lot of battles, there was a lot of shifting, there was a lot of movement. So that can be said as the interim period. Coming to the last history ka question, how did colonial rule affect the tribals in India and what was their response to the colonial oppression? तो सिंपल सी चीज है, बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड सारे क्वेश्चंस पूछे गए हैं, पर्टिकुलरली अगर हिस्ट्री की अगर बात करें, एंड विल सी द सेम थिंग अप्लाइज फॉर बोथ ज्योग्राफी एंड सोसाइटी आल्सो. एंड ये वाला क्वेश्चन अगर 13th क्वेश्चन भी हम देखें तो दिस हैज अ ग्रेट अमाउंट ऑफ ओवरलैप विद सोशियोलॉजी, बिकॉज इफ यू आर अ स्टूडेंट ऑफ सोशियोलॉजी तो ये पेपर में आपको बहुत उसका एडवांटेज मिला है, राइट? तो हाउ डिड द colonial रूल इम्पैक्ट ट्राइबल्स? सबसे पहले सबसे बड़ी चीज हमारी बात करेंगे लैंड एलिनेशन की, फॉरेस्ट एक्ट्स की, then forced labor and exploitation, then cultural erosion, right? And the money economy, or essentially the economic exploitation. तो इन सब चीजों में आप एग्जाम्पल जितने ज्यादा आपको आते हैं, the more detail you can go in, that is better. But core ideas ये हैं कि it is the alienation of land. Why? Because the tribals held land in a different way than the settled societies. But when the two mixed, that led to conflict. Forced labor, क्योंकि पहले क्या होता था, the tribals lived their own independent life inside the forest, but the British came in and they like कि भैया ये एरिया हमको monetize करना है, तो like these people are now going to be agriculturalists. So that led to conflict. Then cultural erosion, in the sense the British were very very forcefully trying to integrate all the tribals in a similar manner. कि भाई सब एक ही तरह दिखे, एक ही तरह करे. Why? Because it becomes easier for the British to then collect taxes. So that also led to conflict. And obviously money lenders के साथ हमेशा से ही दिक्कत रही है. तो tribal response क्या था? There were frequent rebellions and revolt. There were social religious reform movements that took place. Like for example the Munda rebellion, the Tana Bhagat movement, right? And there was a lot of political mobilization and assertion. तो ये तीनों चीजें जो हैं, ये कभी भी आप देखोगे whenever people are oppressed in any part of the country, not just tribals, any people in general, so they will revolt, they will try and reform their own society, and eventually, because the system was such in that political mobilization became one of the methods in which people could achieve their community goals. So that is also something that we see a lot of in like not just tribals but also in the Dalits, in a lot of other Muslim League में भी यही हुआ था. तो बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी ऐसी कुछ कुछ चलती रहती हैं. तो कंक्लूजन में इस क्वेश्चन में अगर हम आए तो यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द प्रेजेंट डे स्टेटस ऑफ ट्राइबल्स, राइट? कि हम बात कर रहे थे कि कॉलोनियल एरा में क्या हुआ है. देन यू कैन आल्सो टॉक अबाउट कि प्रेजेंट डे स्टेटस ऑफ ट्राइबल्स क्या है. अगर आपको इफ यू हैव सम स्टैट्स ओवर हियर, वर्जीनियस शाशा रिपोर्ट के बारे में आपने पढ़ा है, थोड़ा बहुत कुछ है तो मेंशन कर सकते हो यहाँ पे. नहीं है तो आप एक जनरल आर्गुमेंट देके ये भी छोड़ सकते हो यहाँ पे. बट अगेन कीप इन माइंड, जैसे कौस्तुभ सर ने ये बोला था कि द मोर इंटरकनेक्टेड यू कैन मेक योर आंसर, the more you can display your ability to think beyond just the limits of the question. अब ऐसा नहीं करना है कि क्वेश्चन को छोड़ के बाकी सब कुछ आपने लिख दिया, but 1 or 2 line if you can enter here and there, that is a very very good thing, right? So that ends the discussion on modern history, and I think Kaustubh sir can please take up the geography wala section from here on.
Sure. Thank you, Abhijit. That was a very quick run through the history part, and that was kind of like nostalgia कि वो सब चीजें discuss करना और going through all this. I'll share the screen.
Do that.
Yeah. So is it visible clearly? Yeah.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. So let us start the discussion. जैसे शुरुआत में हमने बात की थी कि more applied, so climate change has been like a pillar of question paper. तो यहाँ पे अगर देखेंगे, पहले we'll take the first question, question number 4. Discuss the consequences of climate change on food security in tropical countries. Now they have specifically focused on tropical countries. आप difference देखिए, इसके पहले अगर सवाल आते थे तो they were India specific majorly. So what they've done is they're ब्रॉडर कैनवास आपको दिखता है कि कहीं तो ग्लोबल इंपैक्ट देख रहे हैं, कहीं पे ट्रॉपिकल कंट्रीज की बात हो रही है. तो यहाँ पे आप अगर सिर्फ इंडिया की बात करते हैं तो दैट वुड बी इनएडिक्वेट. मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये छोटा सा चेंज है, छोटा सा एस्पेक्ट है, लेकिन इसको अगर आप नोटिस करें ऐसी चीजें क्वेश्चन में, तो दैट कैन सेट यू और योर आंसर अपार्ट फ्रॉम द क्राउड, बिकॉज दीज थिंग्स आर जनरली मिस्ड बाय मेनी कैंडिडेट्स. वो ऐसा हो जाता है कि फूड सिक्योरिटी पे इंपैक्ट पूछा है तो वो उस पर ही फोकस करते हैं, लेकिन वो स्केल, सी ज्योग्राफी इज ऑल अबाउट स्केल, इट्स अबाउट स्पेस. सो इफ यू नेग्लेक्ट दैट पार्ट, it will be reflected in your marks. So let us focus on the question consequences of climate change on food security पूछा है. तो यहाँ पे अगर हम देखेंगे तो शुरुआत में we can write about, see you can start यहाँ पे stats mention किया है, न्यूज़पेपर में आर्टिकल्स आते हैं, अभी IPCC की रिपोर्ट से रहता है. So you can pick up any important number or report which clearly mentions that this is so many people are hungry, so many people are suffering, right? All this can be just the beginning, right, of your answer. अब body of the answer की अगर बात करें, because it's a 10 marker, तो इसमें it's not just that you have to put up कि जितने ज्यादा पॉइंट आप पुट अप करोगे उतने मार्क्स मिलेंगे. मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि उस पॉइंट्स के साथ थोड़ा बहुत डिस्क्रिप्शन जो उसको मोर ऑर्गेनिक, थोड़ा फ्लो आंसर में आ जाए. तो 2-3 चीजें जो हाईलाइट होनी चाहिए वो होनी चाहिए. जैसे यील्ड कम हो रहा है. अब ट्रॉपिकल कंट्रीज की अगर हम बात करें तो यील्ड कम हो रहा है, ये तो एक क्लियर कट बात है. बिकॉज अब उसके पीछे यील्ड कम हो रहा है तो क्यों हो रहा है वो डिस्क्रिप्शन में यू कैन राइट अबाउट 2 or 3 पॉइंट्स व्हिच आर ऑलरेडी इंक्लूडेड हियर. फॉर एग्जांपल वाटर स्कार्सिटी. So there was a report also which clearly says that if 1 degree increase in temperature occurs, that reduces the yield of wheat in India by more than 6% or something like this, right? So whatever the number is, you can confirm it. So उसको जोड़ के अगर आप लिखे तो आपको समझ में आएगा कि एक prominent point is yield is reducing. Second thing that you can note very important is, see हम हमेशा agriculture मतलब crops की ही बात करते हैं. But this is a very comprehensive list. Think about disruption of fishing communities. So non-vegetarian population is also very significant population of any community, any country, right? So tropical countries की अगर बात करें तो ये एस्पेक्ट भी आपके राइटिंग में आना चाहिए. तो यहाँ पे सही मायने में इंक्लूड किया गया है कि जिस तरह वेदर डिस्टर्बेंसेस इंक्रीज होते हैं, टेम्परेचर ऑफ सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर चेंज होता है. So there is migration of the fishing resources, fisheries, as well as it is extinction of many species, right? वाटर में तो ये भी होता है. उसके अलावा ये एक पार्ट हो गया कि यील्ड कम हो गया, सो वो पानी से हो या जमीन से हो. दूसरा इसमें आप देखेंगे कि क्लाइमेट चेंज की वजह से और उससे आए हुए डिसरप्शन की वजह से व्हाट वी सी इज even the cropping pattern is changing. So people are changing in their dietary habits. Occupational changes आ रहे हैं. So all this is also impacting on their nutrition, right? And then you can also highlight one aspect, that loss of biodiversity. तो इससे क्या होता है ना, जितना diversity, see, bring that concept of diversity to your diet. So if your diet loses that diversity, then you get what you call as hidden hunger. तो ये एक मेजर इशू वैसे भी न्यूज़पेपर्स में, करंट अफेयर्स में डिस्कस हुआ था कि हिडन हंगर, राइट? So when we speak about hidden hunger, nutritional deficiency, so then you can just in 1 or 2 lines you can bring the focus also towards the increasing diseases, epidemics बढ़ रहे हैं, communicable and non-communicable. All this is because of dietary change which is being accelerated very fast because of the impact of climate change. So food security की एक बात यहाँ पे हुई है. और conclusion में आप लिखोगे तो उसमें एक चीज, again I'm just highlighting the portions which can add as value additions, right? Other content is already given on the screen. तो conclusion में अगर आप लिखेंगे तो जो आपने अभी G20 में भी देखा, and even at the level of United Nations it has been highlighted that millets, right? And India is one of the leading producer of millets, right? ये हमारा culture रह चुका है. Local food, right? Seasonal food, fresh food, which is grown close to where you are situated. So that kind of conclusion, if you give in a crisp 2 or 3 lines, I think that can make a very good impact on the examiner. So let us move to the next question. Why is the world today confronted with a crisis of availability of and access to freshwater resources? See, again, ये भी कहीं तो straight forward एक current affairs as well as global warming, climate change, the same story continues. And very recently we have seen not only the rural areas or the areas which are affected by droughts, but we have seen cities like Bangalore, we have seen cities like Shimla suffer from such crisis. So this is not just a rural or कहीं बुंदेलखंड बाघेलखंड की हम बात कर रहे हैं, ऐसा नहीं है. We are also speaking about major urban centers like Bangalore, Hyderabad, and tomorrow it may be your own city, right? So why is the world today confronted? And again, world today confronted, it's not just about India. right? I mean, this is something that I'm observing very clearly in the question paper, right? That world today confronted with a crisis of availability and access to fresh water. So यहाँ पे आप शुरुआत कर सकते हैं ओवरऑल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ फ्रेश वाटर वैसे भी बहुत कम होता है ओनली 2.5% ऑफ टोटल वाटर ऑन द प्लैनेट उसमें भी मैक्सिमम इज लॉक्ड अप इनटू द ग्लेशियर्स majority of it is also present below the surface what we call as groundwater and very few percentage right it's present as freshwater streams right lakes and rivers mein. And now you know what we have done to our streams, right? We have already dammed them, pollution hai, and all these factors. So there is a lot of pressure. Now, one differentiating factor I would like to highlight in this question that 10 mark ka hai, to aapko content bahut, that cannot be something that you can count on to write more content. But think about it, that why is the question asking you the why is the world today? See, famine, resource scarcity, water availability, these have been the problem since mankind's evolution, right? Lekin, why is the world today confronted? So I think one aspect of geography that you can bring in is settlements. Think about it, that the migration that is occurring from rural areas is attracted to large centers like Mumbai, Delhi, right? Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad. So, and you see the pattern, it's vertical growth. Because horizontally, we see काफी congested hai, and horizontally there are limits to how much it can spread, right? Especially for a city like Mumbai. Now, in this context, think about it, that the carrying capacity of that particular region is dependent on only two major sources. Either it is the river or it is the rainfall. And no amount of rainfall and no amount of, water in the river can cater to the kind of urban densities that we are looking at. Right. So this, I think this practical approach, if you bring in your answers, that urban centers need to plan their water resources. Otherwise, the rising vertical urban centers are going to create a huge challenge for supply of fresh water, right? So depletion of resources यहाँ पे लिखा है, तो यहाँ पे 2-3 चीजें बहुत practical है. यहाँ पे सबसे पहले ही लिखा है population growth. So I would add the density aspect of it to the discussion. Climate change है, over extraction to definitely is a prime reason that we are not able to recharge. And यहाँ पे again, this is at a general level, anyone can say कि चलो हम extract ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं और recharge is not occurring. But how will you bring in geography? Think about it. आप अगर इंडिया का geography बात करो, physiography, if I have to use that term, then only sedimentary strata is the Great Indian Plain. Himalayas भी है ऊपर से sedimentary, but the major portion, regional geography in India especially, is peninsular plateau. Now, peninsular plateau में groundwater reservoirs, aquifers जिसको बोलते हैं, they are all segregated, scattered and not interconnected because it's a impervious igneous and metamorphic rocks, right? So recharge is very, very difficult unless it is deliberately done, right? And this is one of the main reasons why resources are drying up very fast. Clear? So इस तरह थोड़ा सा आप उसको और applied कर सकते हैं. अभी pollution की बात की है, जो available है, एक तो कम available है, वो ज़्यादा fluctuate कर रहा है, and जो है उसको हम pollute कर रहे हैं. So this is the broad structure, right? And water mismanagement तो है, poor governance है. So distribution, maybe many a times what happens is you have enough but you are not able to distribute, right? That is also the problem. So inequitable access due to socio-economic disparities, which is very aptly mentioned here. Conclusion में आप ये लिख सकते हैं कि highlight on the finite amount of these resources, right? So highlight that aspect कि ये finite है, ये proportion, और इसको हमको recharge करना ही है, right? Unless we effortfully do that recharge, it will have very serious repercussions in the future, right? How are fjords formed? How do they constitute some of the most picturesque areas of the world? Now, this is something which you will not find in routine geography textbooks, sort of, right? So fjords, because India mein to we don't find fjords. This is a Scandinavian feature, right? Which is seen in especially Arctic belt. So this is the only question which I found straightforward, very technical. This is given in GC Leong. If you read the GC Leong, again, the second part, why do they constitute some of the most picturesque areas? I know this is applied again. So ये आपको textbook में ये भी नहीं मिलेगा. मतलब GC Leong will also not be very specifically speaking about why they constitute, right? So अभी fjord क्या होता है? You can start the answer straightforward. It's simple, right? You know, fjords are the structures which are because of glacial impact, right? वो उससे वो migraine से बने होते हैं. The material which is sediments which are brought by glaciers. Now they constitute some of the most picturesque areas of the world. So you can highlight the elements. So very nicely it is said कि crystal clear waters hota hai, cliffs hota hai, mountains hota hai, and many times these mountains are covered with snow, right? There's a lot of biodiversity, right? So all this points can be highlighted, and obviously the cultural heritage, right? So you can conclude the two conclusions we have mentioned here: ecological recreational functions and fostering biodiversity, supporting fisheries. यहाँ पे what you can highlight is climate change is really playing havoc. यहाँ मतलब वो होता ना कि if there is a lot of climate change, it's going to heat the water up, it's going to disturb the biodiversity, it's going to melt the glaciers, and again this fjords can, जैसे हिमालयस के बारे में बात करते हैं, it's a fragile ecosystem, right? So that can be highlighted at the end. This is again one question which I believe कि ये जो था ना starting में अभिजीत सर ने भी कहा, केसी सर ने भी कहा कि interlinkages. So this is, see, why is the southwest monsoon called Purvaiya in Bhojpur region? So it's a very specific region of India, right? Bihar का जो area है, and why it is called Purvaiya, and how has this directional seasonal wind system influenced the cultural ethos of the system? So this is society geography mix up, right? So if you see contextual, अब एक broadly अगर हम बात करें तो agree, see, Indian monsoon, आपने बॉलीवुड से लेके एग्रीकल्चर मतलब लगान मूवी देखा होगा, फिर उसके बाद there are a lot of Bollywood movies and the songs which are around monsoon, rainfall, and so on. So that itself explains that how closely it is associated with your culture and your daily life, right? Abhi main body of the answers, see, the geographical aspect of it is very clear that the Bay of Bengal branch, when it hits the Himalayas, Purvanchal, it's the Himalayas का जो convexity है towards south, the convexity towards south or towards the equator, this convexity pushes from Purvanchal, it pushes the winds towards Delhi and northwestern region. That is why typically when we have monsoon as southwest, this monsoon arrives in this region as southeast or eastern winds, easterly winds. That explains this Purvaiya, right? आगे उन्होंने जो रीजन दिया है उसके बारे में भी यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है. And see, you know, why cultural ethos? Bihar, Uttar Pradesh has majorly been agrarian. This is called the hearth, H-E-A-R-T-H, hearth of Indian civilization. अभी भी a lot of people are dependent and very closely related. इसको geography में there is a concept called topophila. So you are very closely emotionally attached to the piece of land. राइट थोड़ा इसको स्ट्रेच करूंगा तो हमारा पूरा महाभारत भी उस पे ही है, जमीन के टुकड़े पे ही पूरी लड़ाई थी, राइट? सो ये जो अटैचमेंट, इमोशनल अटैचमेंट है लैंड से, सो दैट्स वेरी मच अलाइव टुडे आल्सो इन दिस सेंटर्स बिकॉज these states are largely agrarian now also, right? So that explains how and why this monsoon and this Purvaiya is very closely related. So आप फेस्टिवल्स की बात कर सकते हैं. सी, वी एज अ कम्युनिटी हैव चेंज्ड इकोनॉमिकली इन द पास्ट फ्यू डिकेड्स, बट आज भी आप देखते देयर इज अ डिस्टिंक्ट एग्रीकल्चरल लिंकेज टू मोस्ट आवर फेस्टिवल्स. सो दैट इज समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी कॉमन सेंस नॉलेज दैट यू कैन यूज व्हाइल राइटिंग दिस आंसर, कि उनके जो कपड़े हैं, उनके जो फेस्टिवल्स है, उनका जो डाइट है, ऑल दीज साइकिल्स आर इन सिंक विद द क्रॉपिंग साइकिल, राइट? So this is the answer, right? और 10 मार्क के लिए this will be sufficient if you write well, right? So conclusion में आप लिख सकते हो कि ये जो southwest monsoon है, climate है, that is reflected in our right everyday life. So now to keep it as it is, we need to ensure that we I mean, that's not the word you use in the answer, but we do not interfere negatively. Right? Or we every individual take this as a lesson that we do not contribute to larger carbon emissions, ecological footprint, or even climate change, right? So that is the conclusion. I think the geography questions here are over. Then I think question number 14. Yeah, question number 14. Yes, I'm coming to that. Yeah. So if you look at the question number 14, comment on the resource potential of long coastline of India and highlight the status of natural hazard preparedness in these areas. Now, again, when you read this question, the first thing that comes to your mind is Odisha. Odisha has done a brilliant work after the super cyclone that came in 1999 and destroyed the state, and its a lot of population was affected, life and property was destroyed. After that, अभी बिपरजॉय भी आके गया है, उसके पहले भी a few major cyclones came to Odisha, but the damage was minimal. So that is something which can guide your answer. It's a 15 marker, so it gives you enough space to give, write a case study. And I believe that if you have such hinge or hook in your head that my answer is going to be driven by this kind of case, then उसमें वो optimism or constructive writing भी reflect होता है. So coming back, resource potential of long coastline of India. So you can start with there are 2 or 3 introductions which are given here, right? And India is blessed with a very long coastline, 7,500 के ऊपर हमारा coastline, right? So resource potential of the long coastline of India. So अब resource का जो basic definition है, just अगर आपने बहुत पढ़ा नहीं है या आपको memory पे rely नहीं करना है, तो think about it. It's simple that when you say resource, what is the different kind of resources that you will find there? So broad classification can be right, the food that you get. So food resources, energy resources, right, fresh water resources, right. So these are the different mineral resources. So these are the different categories. You can highlight that, right. So mining natural resources, power generation, trade resource, tourism potential, food resources, and resources in the form of biodiversity. इसमें मैं एक और ऐड करूंगा water resources, because we are working on technology which is desalination technology, and that will help us utilize the ocean. I think Kavarati, Lakshadweep, already they are doing it. They are trying it in Arunachal, this Andaman Nicobar also, right? So this is the main body of your essay, and isme I would say that while you are writing this answer, the more specific answers or more specific points that you can raise, examples that you can give, it will be always better, right? Climate change, ये problems आ रहे हैं, right? Coordination and all, and then conclusion. So broadly speaking, यहाँ पे again climate change can be seen as a theme, right? In this answer also. Now look at the next question. Identify and discuss the factors responsible for diversity of natural vegetation in India. Assess the significance of wildlife sanctuaries in rainforest regions of India. Now here again, it's a very interesting question, that identify and discuss the factors responsible for diversity of natural vegetation. So यहाँ पे तो पूरा geography है ना. Think about it. It's about the vast landscape of India. It's about the different altitudes that India has, right? From coastal plains to plateau structures. We have Himalayas which stretch from tropical, subtropical, temperate to alpine zones. So this altitude or vastness का जो combination है, and there are Tropic of Cancer passes through center. So all this combined together to give us different types of climates, which are rather, I would say, even Mediterranean type just as a climate which is so much dominated by shifting pressure belts. वैसा climate हमारे तमिलनाडु में भी है, just because of retreating monsoons. So we have India can be called as the microcosm of world climates. Most of the world climates can be seen in India in some variation, with some variations. So that gives this diversity of natural vegetation. और शुरुआत में आंसर के आप ये highlight कर दो कि natural vegetation is a function of what? It is not just the function of climate. It is also the function of soil. So soil, topography, and climate, they all together give rise to natural vegetation. Clear? Assess the significance of wildlife sanctuaries in rainforest regions. So rainforest में जो wildlife sanctuaries है, उस पे आपको फोकस करना जरूरी है, तो आपको कुछ एग्जांपल्स देने पड़ेंगे. सो यहाँ पे आई वुड से इवन यू कैन ड्रॉ सर्टेन थिंग्स, स्केच सर्टेन थिंग्स, हाईलाइट सर्टेन थिंग्स, इवन पेक्युलैरिटीज ऑफ इट. जैसे आप अरुणाचल में जाते हो, रेन फॉरेस्ट की अगर बात करें, ट्रॉपिकल एवरग्रीन टाइप ऑफ वेजिटेशन उधर भी है नॉर्थ ईस्ट में, तो वहां पे यू फाइंड ऑर्किड्स व्हिच आर वेरी टिपिकल, राइट, द लोकल एंडेमिक वेराइटीज ऑफ सिट्रस फ्रूट्स एंड ऑल. वेस्टर्न घाट्स की अगर बात करते हो तो वेस्टर्न घाट्स हैज वेरी डिफरेंट स्पीसीज, एंड यू नो दीज रेन फॉरेस्ट्स आर वेरी रिच इन बायोडाइवर्सिटी, बट दे आर नॉट द बिग गेम कंट्री. मतलब बहुत बड़े जानवर नहीं होते हैं, लेकिन जो डाइवर्सिटी है, स्पेशली सह्याद्री की बात करें तो रेप्टाइल्स, this is one class which is like you should be highlighting, right? So this is, you've seen that wide diversity. There are different points mentioned here. Prominently, it boils down to the 3 or 4 factors which you can highlight majorly, and then all these points can be brought in those broader points which will make your answer more crisp and appealing, right? Last, I think there is one more question. Why did human development fail to keep pace with economic development? Very interesting applied question. That economic development to bada hai. So economic growth rate, we know it's a very high growth rate we have. But human development, हमारा HDI जो है, वो पीछे रहा है. अब इसमें इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के पैरामीटर्स क्या है आप जानते हैं. इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चरल डेवलपमेंट है, कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर है, यू नो ऑल दिस, राइट? बट व्हेन यू स्पीक अबाउट ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट, what are we speaking about? So we are speaking about education, we are speaking about health, we are speaking about longevity, right? So quality of life इसमें include generally नहीं. I mean, we assume that HDI gives an idea about quality of life, but there is a different index which is PQLI कहता है. तो वो एक quality of life ये aspect आप highlight कर सकते हैं. तो why it has lagged behind the economic development? See, यहाँ पे stats है, reports है. That's the best way you can start the answer. राइट. और यू कैन ऑल्सो अभी हाईलाइट कि अभी हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी काफी फोरम में ये बात की कि वी आर द इन द टॉप 5 एंड नाउ वेरी सून विल बी गोइंग अप इन द रैंकिंग्स, राइट, टॉप 5 इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. सो यू कैन स्टार्ट दैट वे एंड यू कैन इवन अभी करंट अफेयर्स है तो जैसे G20 अभी इफ आई वुड बी राइटिंग टुडे, राइट, यू हैव रिटन दिस आंसर. So G20 हुआ this, that shows the economic prowess of India, right? Handling such a big event. Now main body disparity क्यों आया है? So economic growth ये जो है joblessness है. See यहाँ पे what is the prominent point that you will be highlighting? That the growth has not been inclusive. The growth has benefited certain sectors. I'm saying that results into certain sections of population. So sectors की अगर बात करें तो you know the Levesian transformation. I think you can mention this. It's a common knowledge that Levesian transformation जो कहते हैं कि primary to secondary to tertiary. What India has done is India has leapfrogged from primary to tertiary, and कहीं तो manufacturing हमारा पीछे रह गया था. That is why you see a lot of since 2000, the first decade of 21st century, we have been focusing. Government has been relentlessly talking about Make in India, right, or manufacturing sector. So this is the reason, because there is a realization that we have left the manufacturing sector behind. That has not resulted into inclusion, right? We have not been able to take people out of agriculture जितने proportion में होना चाहिए था. और tourism या services sector का जो growth होना चाहिए था वो limited लोगों को जैसे IT sector में ही focused है, and बहुत broad based हम इसको नहीं बना पाए आज तक. Clear? So this is the broad understanding. Geographical aspect अगर इसको देना है तो you can highlight the difference between urban areas and cities. You can highlight educated and uneducated, skilled, unskilled, right? So these are the problems that we have seen. Then healthcare, as we spoke about, right? So India का public healthcare, तो हम कहते हैं public health, but think about it: is health a public or private thing in India? More than 90% of the patients in India are checked by private practitioners. So it's not. Public health is highly privatized. So यहीं पे खत्म हो जाता है. Then out of pocket expenditure and all, we have seen that, right? Regional disparities है. Some states have done very well, and there are geographical reasons. So this is how you can explain कि ये क्यों हुआ है. So आप हिमालयाज में जाओगे, scattered population है, difficult terrain है. आप central Indian forest में जाओगे तो resources बहुत है लेकिन inaccessible है, tribal population है. So this is how you can explain that there has been a lot of disparity, right? Inequality and infrastructure sanitation. Clear? So steps needed में again in very much detail the points have been mentioned here, that health policy है, education policy है, आज हमारा जो agriculture के लिए laws लाए थे. So government is moving towards modernization of Indian agriculture. then Make in India, right? So a lot of new businesses are being set up in India, especially post-COVID, when the world is looking for. So bring this angle, right? That post-COVID, the world is looking for options other than China. The global value addition chains are becoming localized. Diversity बढ़ रही है resources की. So this is all you can bring in here. Right. So at last, it's very nicely, I think this point has been used that Amartya Sen जो human agency की बात करते थे, and just this idea of roles can bring in that ethics part, right? That ultimately, even Gandhi ji जो कहते थे कि you keep the last poor person at the center and then plan your strategies, right? The last question today from geography. From being net exporter in 1960s, India emerged as the net food import. From being net exporter in 1960s, India emerged as a net food exporter of the world. I think, yeah. So, ये importer होना चाहिए था. 60s,
importer
I guess, right? So,
yeah,
so net importer of the world in 1960s, food import. So we know this story, right? That we imported the PL 480 from America and all, right? So now coming back.
This is one of those other questions also, which can be seen as the intersection of geography and history.
Yeah, sure.
The post-independence history, geography में solve कर लो. This is what has happened a lot with GS1 this year, like interconnections between all three subjects.
Yes, exactly. So here you see different sections merging. लेकिन अभी आप स्टूडेंट्स जब ये चीज को देखते हो, राइट, कि हम फूड इंपोर्टर थे और आज हम एक्सपोर्टर बन चुके हैं, तो द मेन क्रेडिट दैट यू गिव इज टू ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन, right? So we say that yes, it is green revolution which has brought this prosperity in food, right? तो हमको highlight वही करना है, right? The only thing is, you know, one thing in this answer, what the examiner would be looking for is you speak about how geography. आप सिर्फ green revolution की बात करेंगे तो नहीं चलेगा, right? हमारा agricultural area, diversity of crops, diversity of climates, the demand for different types of foods in different seasons from different sections of population, plus the location. जैसे अभिजीत सर बोले कि interlinkage of history and geography, तो जो पहला सवाल था कि ancient India क्यों डेवलप हुआ, तो see, the location of India itself is such that the Silk Route passed very close to India, right? Or rather, it went through India, right? And India was geographically isolated. कि entry and exit point बहुत demarcated और छोटे थे, and it was not easy to invade India, right? So that protected us, and we benefited from the Silk Route, right? So that trade. Plus, we had all the resources at our disposal, right? Fertile land, water, and so on. So यहाँ पे भी वही फैक्टर मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जब हम ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन की बात करते हैं, तो सिर्फ ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन के बारे में बात ना करते हुए इस आंसर में यू शुड हाईलाइट दैट द क्लाइमेटिक डाइवर्सिटी, सॉइल डाइवर्सिटी, the crop diversity, the different food preferences of people, the seasons that we have, all this has contributed to the growth of Indian agriculture, right? And agriculture is not just an economic activity for us. Agriculture has been a part of our life. अभी ऊपर के ही सवाल में हमने सोसाइटी का जो अभी सर बात भी करेंगे उसके बारे में सवाल हमने देखे कि agriculture हमारे festivals, your life is agriculture, right? So right from Mother India to Lagan, we are all fascinated, though we may not be in agriculture today, right? So ये सब है, plus research angle यहाँ पे highlight किया गया है, हमारी policies का भी support उसमें रहा है. अब इसमें एक चीज हमने लिखना चाहिए towards conclusion, that this exporter status, food export status, right? तो इसमें एक चीज हमको देखना है कि ये जो ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, क्लाइमेट चेंज हो रहा है, या जो पॉपुलेशन का प्रेशर है, स्लोली व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज वी आर मूविंग फ्रॉम फूड क्रॉप्स टू कैश क्रॉप्स, राइट? अभी बायोफ्यूल का भी पॉलिसी आ रहा है, सो पॉलिसी है, तो ये सब चीजों में वी हैव टू एंश्योर दैट दिस एग्रीकल्चर रिमेन्स सस्टेनेबल, राइट? इसको सस्टेनेबिलिटी के बारे में बात करके ही आप इस आंसर को क्लोज कीजिए. एंड ये एक चीज रहता है कि जब सस्टेनेबिलिटी की बात करते हैं, तो वी नीड टू एंश्योर दैट इट्स नॉट मोर आउटपुट दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? इसमें ऐसा है कि द क्वालिटी ऑफ आउटपुट इज वेरी क्रूशियल, राइट? वी कैनॉट जस्ट आंसर ऑलवेज द डिमांड ऑफ मार्केट. हमारे मिलेट्स, हमारे पल्सेस, ये आप अगर लिखेंगे कहीं कि इंडिया इज द लार्जेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर, लार्जेस्ट इंपोर्टर ऑफ से पल्सेस है, ऑयल सीड्स है। तो ये एक प्रॉपर बैलेंस डाइट, न्यूट्रिशन और हेल्थ के लिए ये डाइवर्सिटी होना जरूरी है। तो इस डाइवर्सिटी के लिए वैसी पॉलिसीज भी हमने बनाना और उस टाइप का एग्रीकल्चर जो होना चाहिए, क्रॉप डाइवर्सिफिकेशन विच द गवर्नमेंट इज एक्टिवली प्रमोटिंग, शुड बी आवर फोकस। सो आई थिंक that is all about geography. And sir, sir, I would request you to
Yeah.
take over from here.
Yeah, thank you, Kaustav sir.
I think once the video is done, we will also be basically marking these timestamps separately. So jisko jo bhi section dekhna hai, people can watch that more conveniently.
Yeah, so I hope you're able to see the screen. So as we discussed, 6 questions in total, 3 into 3, 30 plus 3 into 15, 45, 75. But if I take into account some overlaps, as we discussed with history, I will possibly borrow 5 marks each from those 3 history questions, 15 into my account, and then maybe 1 question of geography, 5 there. So the weightage that way comes out to be about 90 plus marks based on the knowledge that you gain studying Indian society part. Okay. Now, as I said, definitely Indian society part would not be deemed as very difficult or difficult. मैं rate करूँगा easier to moderate level. उसमें debate होगा, but leaning more towards easier side. Okay. This question. So let's look at the first question. Do you agree? Do you think marriage as a sacrament is losing its value in modern India? Again, the moment you see this question directive, do you think, then you have to be careful whether there is an other side to the coin or not. So you have to present arguments supporting a point of view and also arguments against the point of view. The point of view here is that whether it's losing the value or not. So clearly, the moment you read the question, जैसे आप question पढ़ोगे, आपको पता है कि यार 2 पेज में आंसर लिखना, तो मेरे को 1 पेज के बाद तुरंत मुझे दूसरे साइड पे भी फोकस करना होगा, राइट? एंड यहाँ पे इंट्रोडक्शन कैसे लिखेंगे? अगेन हियर quite a few people might want to define marriage, but I would say definitional approach से ज्यादा preferred होगा कोई data. Okay. And यहाँ पे एक sample data दिया हुआ है, a survey which shows that there are more and more male people are preferring or saying that they're never married. Okay. So trend is moving towards people who are not getting married. Okay. Or maybe or koi data, so you can even talk about, let's say, divorce rates, which is also an indicator whether the marriage is an institution is losing its value or not. Yahan pe, since both the sides have to be presented, if you want to show data, though divorce rates are increasing, still the overall rate is about 1.1% in India, which is again one of the lowest across the world. तो ये दोनों साइड दिखा रहा है. एक साइड ये दिखा रहा है कि यहाँ थोड़ा वैल्यू लूज हो रहा है, but still it is a preferred institution, right? And especially in India compared to other countries. So some data which is kind of presenting both the sides could be a good starter here. Introduction. I would prefer a data-based introduction, a contextual or data-based introduction here instead of a definition. And again, looking at the body, दो side होंगे. There are trends which suggest that it is losing value. एंड यहाँ पे भी आप डिवाइड कर सकते हो, इस पार्ट को भी आप डिवाइड कर सकते हो इनटू वेरियस फैक्टर्स, जैसे क्या इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स हो सकते हैं, राइट, या फिर कल्चरल फैक्टर्स क्या हो सकते हैं, ऑल दीज थिंग्स. ओके, so you can divide it, but again it might be difficult there, so you just try to mention as many points as possible. For example, economic instability, right? Economic instability again affecting both male and females. We are seeing women are getting more and more empowered. They are actively participating in economic activities. So equal amount of pressure is there for both to sustain family. अगर economic status poor है तो फिर you have to plan out for the future. क्या kids को हम raise कर सकते हैं? Cost of living थोड़ा बढ़ रहा है, education, kids का education का cost बढ़ रहा है, तो all these factors. Okay, so these things. Then delayed marriages, and especially this is a trend that you're seeing, especially among women. More and more women are going for higher education. That is again leading to delayed marriages. shift in attitudes. Okay. Now also cultural factors. Now no longer divorce has become such a taboo. Even in so-called rural areas also, we see that the kind of taboo that used to be there earlier, it's not there. So that is also in a way causing the value of marriage to come down. Okay. Then increasing intercaste marriages, secularization of rituals, right? Alternatives to marriage. Now, any institution, marriage as an institution is serving a purpose in the society. Okay. अगर उसका कोई alternative मिलता है हमको जैसे live in relationship हो, तो if people are choosing that, finding it more convenient, और वहां पे भी अगर ज्यादा acceptance, especially in urban areas, we are seeing acceptance of live in relationships and all, then that is also one reason. So similarly, on the other side, why still marriage is a sacrament, or still why people, it's still the preferred choice for a lot of people. Again, India is by and large a religious country, right? And some cultural aspects, or even if you take caste, all of them try to emphasize on the importance of marriage. So since these are playing an important role, the marriage is continuing. Social acceptance of children born out of wedlock. So you don't have to be married only to take care of children. Let's say there are cases of instances where live-in couple is living along with a child. Okay. Then legal protection for married couples, the role of technology. Technology is further helping people to get married, find partners. So by and large, this is how you can look at. And again, you don't have to per se look at 50% यहाँ पे. यहाँ पे a lot of people will be in a dilemma, sir, since we have to look at both the sides. You can lean towards the fact that it is losing its value, because question पढ़ने से हमको थोड़ा tone and tenor पता चल जाता है कि question को देखते ही कि it is driving us to lean towards a particular side. Okay, so यहाँ पे you may want to have more points on the side of the fact that it is losing value. Maybe let's say 60-40 ho, या फिर 70-30. So this is how you may want to go about it. Conclusion, again, it's something, again, I would say it's better to lean on the side of marriage, preserving or protecting the institution of marriage. Okay, so since we have discussed both the sides, you can lean towards the fact that marriage is here to stay. Only a few percentage of people are getting divorced. So or maybe we might want to bring in some more reforms to ensure that this institution is safeguarded, because that is a stepping stone for other institutions like family, where we raise the children and all. So conclusion में अगर आप lean करोगे toward the side of preserving the institution of marriage, that would be a better side. Okay. Then next question, explain why suicide among young women is increasing in Indian society. Now this topic, suicide, I'm pretty sure people of having sociology as an optional would have done PhD in this subject. Okay, so definitely in terms of the insights, there is an advantage there for those people, because as such for GS we don't get into details of what is suicide. We might be studying some reports, NCRB का data, some general trends, वो हम GS में पढ़ते हैं, current affairs में पढ़ते हैं. लेकिन हाँ, here I would say that people with sociology background would be having an edge. At least यहाँ पे आधा एक मार्क नहीं मिला तो that's a crime that has been committed by those people who have taken sociology as optional. तो यहाँ पे भी what is a good way to start? Again, a good way to start is come up with any mention any data, any reports. NCRB data is there. Okay, or you might find that if you look at the total number of cases of suicides, the housewives committing suicide constitute about 17% of the total number of cases. Okay, so data, such data which emphasizes the fact that young women are committing or there is an increasing incidence of suicides among young women. अभी यहाँ पे आंसर में ऐसा होगा कि कई लोग पॉइंट्स ऐसे लिखेंगे कि ओनली यंग पीपल को फोकस करते हुए दे विल राइट पॉइंट्स. कुछ पॉइंट्स ऐसे मेंशन करेंगे जो कि इक्वली अप्लाई होगा वुमेन एज वेल एज मेन. This is where you have to be careful, very careful, that those points that you're suggesting should be focused on women. Why more women compared to men? among young population also, overall young population का proportion ज्यादा होगा suicide का, तो उस पे फोकस करना होगा. यहाँ पे कुछ लोग falter करेंगे. So again, factors like early marriage, so obviously women tend to get married early compared to men. वो एक factor which is again specific to young women. Then gender-based violence, and all the issues pertaining to your menstruation cycle or pregnancy, right? The stress, postpartum stress, all those things. So all those things which are related to health. तो यहाँ पे भी, if you want, you might want to divide it into various sections की crime की वजह से क्यों हो रहा है, या फिर health की वजह से क्या हो रहा है, economy की वजह से क्या हो रहा है. All those, if you may want to subdivide, but again, otherwise, just mention general points here. Then yeah, mental health challenges, double burden of office and household work. Okay. Then financial autonomy, lack of financial autonomy. But at the same time, the fact that more and more women are now participating in economic activities, उनके ऊपर एक stress भी ज़्यादा बढ़ रहा है. जैसे कि अगर कोई, if a male person is committing suicide, एक possibility हो सकता है कि there is lot of pressure to earn, to feed the family. Now, similar kind of pressure is also being dealt by women if they are also economically participating, right? So such aspects you might want to consider. So it's a one-sided, यहाँ पे कोई दूसरा side of the coin नहीं है, straightforward, as many dimensions, as many examples as possible, you do mention. And the moment we are talking about so many negative aspects, there is always a scope for us to come with a, briefly we may want to mention way forward. तो कुछ points आप यहाँ way forward में mention कर सकते हैं, या फिर conclusion ही ऐसा लिखिए कि वो एक way forward suggest कर रहा हो, right? Comma separated way forward points हो सकते हैं. So conclusion is something you can, so what can be done in the future, what should be done, or if there are certain initiatives that have been taken by, let's say, government or various agencies to prevent suicides among young women, those things also can be considered for a conclusion. Okay. Then moving on to the 10th question, quite interesting. Child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Discuss its impact on socialization of children. Again, ये भी थोड़ा मैं थोड़ा socialization, primary socialization is something which people in sociology would have studied, GP Modoc, but obviously you're not
apart
supposed
from primary socialization, I think all of you might remember that there was that news item where the parents had sold the child to buy an iPhone
yes.
to make reels.
Yeah,
I think UPSC also saw it, and this is where the question
unfortunately
came from.
that could be a trigger. Obviously, if you're someone who is looking at, and in fact, this reminds me of a video that I watched a few months ago. There was this child in China who was looking at a CCTV camera which was installed by father. Father ने एक CCTV camera install किया, and father is working in some other city. Okay, वो child वो घर जाते जाते वो गिर जाता है, और जैसे ऊपर उठ के वो रोता है और कंप्लेन करता है. Okay, वो CCTV देख के कंप्लेन कर रहा है. That means वो that father is looking into his mobile phone, which is live streaming the CCTV footage. Okay, this was a moving video, and this is what I was reminded of that video looking at this question. Okay, तो यहाँ पे भी अगर आप क्वेश्चन देखोगे, डिस्कस बोला है, डिस्कस द इम्पैक्ट, राइट? डिस्कस द इम्पैक्ट है, तो फिर यहाँ पे वन साइडेड नहीं होगा आंसर, टू साइडेड होगा. अगेन इट्स लीनिंग टुवर्ड्स हाईलाइटिंग द नेगेटिव एस्पेक्ट्स, की जो नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट ज्यादा है, नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट जो भी है उसके ज्यादा पॉइंट्स लिखेंगे, right? And briefly we will talk about positive points. So I would say 80-20 or 70-30. So mostly you will be focusing on the negative impact of mobile phone. So if you look at the body part also, that is what positive impacts only briefly. तो अगर पहले आप negative mention करो positive, या फिर पहले आप positive mention करके उसके बाद negative mention करो, but mostly you have to deal with the negative aspects. Here also, coming to introduction per se, you can come up with certain data if you find it handy somewhere, because there are certain surveys where it shows that, okay, what is the level of addiction among children who are using mobile phones. There are certain reports, if you get those things, or COVID has also been a watershed moment which has made, or one more incident. You, Abhijit, you mentioned about the Bengal incident. There was one young child who murdered his father because the father was dissuading him not to play PUBG. He was so addicted to playing PUBG, he got so angry, and then he. So there was such instance, couple of incidents. So maybe contextual, maybe ये थोड़ा ज़्यादा गोरी हो जाएगा example, but contextual भी हो सकता है, या फिर any data would be a good way to start, have an introduction. And दोनों केस में I would say यहाँ पे भी socialization का define करना, again as a for last resort, अगर कुछ नहीं मिल रहा है, obviously you will try to have something to talk about socialization per se, but otherwise data is a good way to start. Mostly negative points and then briefly positive points. Negative points, obviously loss of personal relationships, cognitive long term impact क्या होता अगर primary socialization में कोई ठीक से नहीं होता, because you learn certain cultural traits, you learn about traditions which is passed from generation to generation, okay, and that has long term impact on your social skills, your life skills, your cognitive abilities. So all those things you might want to briefly discuss. The exposure, again, you become prey to cyberbullying, child pornography and all. Impact on physical health. Screen exposure time badega, obviously physical health. Or addiction, say you are otherwise you're not exposed to physical activity, that is also affecting the child's health, mental health challenges, okay. And again, the moment we have discussed a lot of negative aspects, there is always a scope to mention some way forward, or the conclusion itself can talk about way forward. So these are the 10 markers. Yahan pe, again, this is subject to interpretation. If I read the question a couple of times, child cuddling is now being replaced by mobile phones. Okay. Now, यहाँ पे question आता है कि ये mobile phone का exposure, is it only due to child? क्योंकि बच्चे mobile phones use कर रहे हैं, उसका क्या impact है, या फिर parents भी ज़्यादा addicted हैं mobiles पे? तो उससे क्या होगा? They are not able to give time to children. Right, so I would still say यहाँ पे briefly अगर आप ये point करते हो, I think that would be a added advantage, और या फिर conclusion में आप लिख सकते हो, however, कि here यहाँ पे categorically mention नहीं किया कि addiction किसके हाथ में, parent भी addicted है तो फिर वो भी time नहीं दे पाएगा, child addicted है, he is also not having those intimate relationship with the parents, okay. So यहाँ पे briefly you might want to touch upon that aspect that the adults are also getting addicted, due to which they're not able to give time to children. Fine. Then coming to the 15 markers, question number 18, 19 and 20. 18. Does urbanization lead to more segregation and or marginalization of poor in Indian metropolises? Okay. Again, does पूछा है तो फिर question directive के हिसाब से there will be two sides of the coin. Okay. And so arguments in favor, arguments against. Again, you might want to give a fairly equal amount of focus, weightage to both the sides. यहाँ पे introduction कैसे करेंगे? Data would be a good way to start off with introduction. यहाँ पे भी maybe some people would try to define what is urbanization, but I would still say if you have data handy, that would be a better way to start off your answer with. Okay. Then body में again arguments in favor. How is it leading to segregation, marginalization, socioeconomic exclusion? We're talking about gated communities. Right, a clear wall of separation is there, so that aspect you might want to mention. Caste segregation. Okay, now in urban areas, though it is not so apparent, but there is subtle caste discrimination. Even in terms of employment of people into manual scavenge, if you see, mostly people, that is one way of caste discrimination that we see. Political exclusion, lot of migrants. Now I have a voter ID card, but I'm working at some other place. Okay, mostly migrant laborers. Okay, again, they are completely out of excluded out of the election process. So political exclusion, उस हिसाब से vulnerable conditions, no social security that is available, impact on families. Okay, so these are some arguments that you want to mention in favor, against, right? A lot of small scale entrepreneurs starting from, let's say, street vendors. Okay, they have many sources of income that ways. Mobility is made possible thanks to urbanization. So some positive points also you might want to mention. So both the sides have to be covered here. And the moment we cover the negative aspects, there is always a scope for us to talk about way forward. जब भी आंसर में many people ask सर क्या कंक्लूजन क्या या फिर वे फॉरवर्ड कब लिखना होता है, अगर लिखना भी होता है, जहां पे भी आंसर में हम नेगेटिव साइड डिस्कस करते हैं, वहां पे ऑलवेज देयर इज अ स्कोप फॉर अस टू टॉक अबाउट वे फॉरवर्ड or as a solution to one of these or some of these negative aspects. Conclusion gives there's a scope of suggesting a way forward in conclusion as well. Okay, coming to next question, why is caste identity in India both fluid and static? 15 marker के लिए I think इससे shortest question कहीं दिखेगा नहीं in terms of the number of words that have been used. Okay. So, हाँ, caste identity, then again question में ही both sides have been mentioned. So obviously you have to discuss in detail, giving equal amount of weightage for the aspect of fluidity, for the aspect of static. Okay. So the changing trends, what is making caste fluid? What are certain things? For example, mobility has become more these days. Certain examples do mention the examples like this. Then political affiliation, emergence of caste-based political parties. This is also making caste fluid. Commensality in urban spaces, especially in urban areas. Okay, you don't ask the caste of another person while you interdine. Commensality. Okay. Then occupation, marriages, intercaste marriages. Okay, so all of these things are making the caste identity quite fluid. At the same time, there is reassertion of caste also. There are cases where caste is playing a very important role. So you talk about those instances, for example, the instances of honor killings. Okay, then new forms of untouchability, occupational discrimination. I've spoken about manual scavengers. Okay. Then caste hierarchy. So see, again, we have to keep this in mind that India is still, more than 60% of India is still living in villages. Okay. So these aspects are going to remain in the majority of India. When we look at majority of India, these aspects are going to remain, and there is going to be a constant reassertion of these identities, caste identities. Conclusion, again, you might want to sum up here. There is a scope of having some quote on caste also, because there is always a scope of using or quoting some person who has spoken about caste per se. The fact that it is still relevant. Also, maybe any contemporary thinkers on caste you may want to mention, or otherwise try to sum it up, because we have mentioned both the sides. Sum it up that caste is still going to be relevant despite some factors which are making it or diluting the entire hierarchy. Right? Then finally, question number 20. Discuss the impact of post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism. Again, discuss है, impact है, तो दोनों side होंगे. So two sides of the coin, but two sides of the coin for two aspects. So you can divide the entire answer into 4 blocks in a way. एक तो ये होगा, राइट. और इंडिविजुअल आइटम को फर्दर 4 blocks 2 blocks. इफ यू डिस्कसिंग अबाउट एथनिक आइडेंटिटी, you discuss about positive as well as negative aspects, and that also split into various subheadings. Similarly, you may want to discuss about communalism, mostly negative, and then briefly positive, spread across many other subheadings. So, and here also there is a scope of having a historic dimension in the introduction, because we're talking about liberal economy, liberalization. So you can talk about 1991 LPG reforms, or you might want to quote certain ethnic violence or communal violence incidents which is related to economic deprivation. Okay, so anything can go. Again, main body, as I discussed, divided into 2 broad parts. Ethnic identity में क्या positive effects है, क्या negative effects, negative impact है. Similarly, इसमें भी देखा जाए communalism में positive impact क्या है, negative impact है क्या है. For a 15 marker, about let's say 6 to 7 points highlighting each aspect, and within that also you might want to subdivide. Okay, that is a good attempt for you. Finally, conclusion, because we are discussing a lot of negative aspects here, there is always a scope to mention some way forward, or conclusion can be some suggestion as to what to be done. यहाँ पे भी क्योंकि ethnicity, again, your tribal identity is also in a way related to your ethnic identity. तो वहाँ पे भी you can mention some recommendation of Virginie's खाका report का, जो यहाँ पे भी आ सकता है, as we have seen in one of the questions associated with tribals. So this is pretty much about the Indian society. So as I said, not too difficult, fairly, I think moderately difficult or easy, I would say. Yeah.
Right. So I think that brings us to the end of this discussion. And thank you all for joining. Over the next couple of days, GS2, 3, 4 सारे papers हम इसी तरीके से live में discuss करेंगे. So that अगर आप तैयारी कर रहे हो तो एटलीस्ट आपको एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग आए कि किस तरीके से आपको ये इंटरलिंकेजेस डेवलप करनी है, राइट? बिकॉज इन द एंड, लाइक वी हैव सीन विद ऑल ऑफ दीस क्वेश्चंस, हिस्ट्री इज इंटरलिंक्ड विद ज्योग्राफी, ज्योग्राफी एंड सोसाइटी आर इंटरलिंक्ड, सोसाइटी एंड हिस्ट्री आर इंटरलिंक्ड. सारी चीजें अगर इंटरलिंक करके चल रही है तो आपके दिमाग में भी इट शुड हैव दैट इंफॉर्मेशन इन योर हेड should be already interlinked, so that then it is becoming easier and easier for you to put the ideas out on paper, right? So on that note also I'd like to say कि हमारा एक GS Advanced का course आ रहा है, which deals a lot with the main specific preparation, where we deal with these sorts of interconnections. So if you're interested, you can check that out on courses.upscprep.com. GS Advanced का course है. This is a mains specific course. So if you're somebody who is confident of your prelims skills, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है वहाँ पे, but mains में कुछ problems हैं, question का depth नहीं समझ आ रहा है, जैसे कि आज हमने काफी discuss किया, then you can check out that course. Other than that, this PDF is obviously available on our Telegram channel. You can download it from there. And tomorrow, day after, and so on, we will also be covering GS2, 3, and 4 का discussion. So best of luck on your UPSC journey. And अगर और कोई आपको कहीं doubt है, कुछ पूछना चाह रहे हैं, तो please feel free to reach out to us on Telegram, on email, या इस वीडियो के भी आप comment में हमें बता सकते हैं. Right. So with that, we'll end the session. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, KC sir. Thank you, Kaustubh sir. And we'll end.